Here's a spoiler alert for you. You do not need to spend thousands of pounds on a writing degree in order to write a book. Now, I did do that, and while I don't regret it because I was a lost little lamb and I needed the guidance of those professors to get me through, you don't. You're here being proactive, looking for ways to help you write a book on the internet. So you're already doing better than I did. Well done you. So to give you a bit of a leg up, here are the 5 most important key takeaways I took from a creative writing master's to save you 10 grand. Number 1, feedback as early on as possible. The temptation is going to be, if you're writing solo, is to squirrel away and write your book and not show anyone until you think you've got it as perfect as it can be. But this is going to do you no favours, I promise you. On an NA, you're forced within the first few weeks to show what you've written in the first few weeks. So the first few chapters you share around the group, everyone does it, and you all give critique on each other's first few chapters. So just imagine someone saying that they're not quite sure where this particular secondary character's plot's going, or they've already noticed a plot hole in chapter 3, and you give it to someone when you've paned away at 20 chapters, and then someone finds a massive plot hole and you've got to go and redo the whole thing. If someone's picked up on a potential flaw just as you've written it within the last week or 2, surely it's better to change it then when it's still fresh in your memory. So for an example, several of my chapters were completely scrapped. I started on a chapter, I thought it was a little bit too corny, don't think it completely worked with the tone of my book, but I also thought it was an important part of the character's journey, and everyone agreed with me. They were like, yeah, it doesn't work. Scrapped the whole thing, managed to get the same point across in a much more subtle way, and it meant I could change it before it was finished. So get people to see your version 1 as you're creating it. It's going to save you so much time later on. Tip number 2, edit the first chapter. I remember our tutor saying to us, take out the first sentence of your first chapter, and if it still makes sense, take out the next sentence. Take out the first paragraph, and if your story still makes sense, take out 3 paragraphs, and go on and go on. And she said quite often some students can delete the whole first chapter and the book still makes sense, because we have this need to set the scene. And yeah, you do need to do that research in setting the scene so you've got it in your head, but it's boring to read. People don't want that much backstory, just get straight into the action. So write it out by all means, but be ruthless in your editing, in your early on editing. If you think you can delete that first chapter, and I know some of my friends deleted the first chapter and started from chapter 2. So yes, you do need to know your backstory inside out, but you don't need to put it there in the book because it's boring. In this world where attention span deficits are getting more and more common, you need to grab the reader and give them the tea straight away, honey. Number 3, keep the structure simple. At least to start, at least for your version 1. Some people like to show off. They want to have a multi-perspective, non-chronological book that's so chopped up and so against the grain of what's normal that it gets so confusing that it just doesn't work. You might think, oh yeah, but my favourite writer did this cool book where it was like this person's perspective and this person's perspective, and then there was a twist, and then it was started halfway through and the plot, and it just gets messy. And even if you do have a favourite writer that writes very complicated plots, it's likely that it didn't start out that way. It's likely that the first ever time they attempted to write a book, they just stuck to a traditional structure. It doesn't mean you can't make it more complicated after you've got the first one out, but don't worry too much about structures and different perspectives. Maybe just get it as one first person perspective or one third person's perspective overlooking all the characters. Keep it simple, get your story out, then you can play away, then you can play around with the structure afterwards. Or you might find you don't even need to, because if it's a strong enough story and your characters are strong enough, you shouldn't need to. It's better to focus on the strength of your tone of voice first. Moving on to tip number 4, use the Snowflake Method. Before I went into doing my creative writing degree and I was looking around online on how I can start to write a story, I stumbled across the Snowflake Method and it really spoke to my sense of logic. And then only a few weeks into the creative writing masters, we were told, guess what structure to outline the whole plotline of our book? The Snowflake Method. So you literally start by writing a 1-sentence summary of the story that you want to write. Then you elaborate that into a full paragraph, highlighting the key disasters that happen in the plot and give away the ending to yourself. Then you want to do that for each character. For each character's outline, you want to outline their disasters and their resolution. Then go back to that first paragraph and elaborate on each sentence, so it's getting more and more intricate, like a snowflake. To read how to do the Snowflake method from beginning to end in full, have a look at this blog. I'll put it in the description as well. That's the one that helped me. That's the one that was then referred to on my degree, and I'll be using it in a couple of months' time as well. I want to get started on the second book of my trilogy that I have in my head, so I'll bring you along on that as well to show you the actual reality of it. And tip number 5 from a creative writing degree, you're going solo instead, is to get a community around you. That's one thing that was so valuable doing the creative writing masters, is you're thrown into a group of peers that are all writing in the same genre as you. So you have that in common, and you're held accountable by your degree to submit some of your work every few weeks, and then you take it in turns, and some weeks you'll be reading other people's work to give them critique. So if you're going it alone, you need to get really proactive about this. It's a great time to be in with the digital age, with TikTok. It's easy to connect and find people out there that exist that are doing the same thing as you. But what I want you to do, if you take anything away from this video, is don't just find people and follow them and think, well, they're doing this. Actually reach out to people. I think when people are trying to expand a network on social media, they throw out some generic comments like, love that for you, this looks ace babes. You need to actually connect with people, ask people if they're looking for beta readers, if they're not even looking for beta readers, just looking for readers to help them as they go along, and in return you'll help with their manuscript as well. Then set deadlines for yourself to hold each other accountable, have a video call if you want to catch the vibe for them first. And if anyone finds this video and wants to do that, please put a little blurb in the description of what genre you're writing in, how far along you are, if you're open to people getting in touch with you to see if you can build up little mini communities. Who knows, if there's enough response, maybe I could facilitate some little groups and get them going on. Please don't be shy with this. I've had dozens of people's pitches in my degree and since my degree, when people say, I have this idea for a story, and give me a little blurb, and I've come away from some of them thinking, I really want to know what happens to that character, and I haven't found out yet. For more writing tips in both the fiction and corporate world, please give me a little subscribe, and I will be back next week. Find me on TikTok. If you're really peachy keen, sign up to my email newsletter as well. I'll be sending an email out each week to give you the heads up on what the latest video is. Don't forget that call to action as well. Tell us about what story you want to write in the comments below, and we'll get back to you, and don't be scared. The temptation is going to be, if you're working solo, to I can't pronounce my R's. To